Welcome. One of the most profound questions you can ask when you read the Hebrew scriptures is about the promised Messiah. Was he just supposed to be a great human king, or did the prophets actually see someone divine? Today, we're going to piece together the ancient evidence and see what kind of portrait they really painted. Okay, so the Old Testament is just packed with prophecies about a coming Messiah. But here's the thing, it's not a simple picture. It's more like a fascinating, complex puzzle. So let's try and solve it. Are these ancient texts just describing a human hero, or are they pointing to something much bigger, like God himself stepping into human history? All right, our first piece of this puzzle comes to us from the prophet Micah, and he gives us a clue that is, on one hand, incredibly specific, but on the other, deeply mysterious, especially when it comes to the Messiah's true origin. So, get this. The prophet absolutely pinpoints the tiny village of Bethlehem as the Messiah's birthplace. That's a very human, very specific detail. But then he drops this bombshell, whose origin is from of old, from ancient days. Now, this isn't just talking about having a long family tree. So what is the prophet really saying here? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. In the original Hebrew, the phrase that's used, mikredem mi yemei olam, means way more than just a long time ago. This is the absolute strongest language the Bible has for eternal existence. In fact, it's the same kind of language used elsewhere to describe God's own timeless, eternal nature. Micah is saying this ruler's origins are literally from eternity. So right out of the gate, Micah hits us with this stunning paradox. The ruler will be fully human, born in a specific town at a specific point in time. And yet, he somehow also possesses a personal existence that stretches back into eternity past. He is both human and timeless. This is our first major clue that we're looking for someone who is far, far more than just a man. Okay, so if the Messiah has eternal origins, what about his actual identity? Well, the prophets don't just stop there. They give him names and titles that are, frankly, shocking, because they seem to put him on the same level as God himself. So take a look at this prophecy from Malachi. The one speaking is Yahweh, God himself, and he says, "I will send my messenger to prepare the way before me." So get the picture. God is promising to come personally, and he's sending someone ahead to announce his arrival. And here, in this super famous passage from Isaiah, we get that messenger's job description. The New Testament, of course, points to this. It says, that's John the Baptist. And what's his mission? It's crystal clear. He's preparing a highway for the Lord, for our God. His whole message is basically to shout from the rooftops, "Here is your God." Let's just pause on that, because the expectation being set here is monumental. The forerunner isn't just rolling out the red carpet for a great teacher or a new king. He's preparing the way for the personal arrival of God himself. I mean, that completely changes the stakes for who this Messiah must be. And the names given to this coming figure, they get even more explicit. Isaiah predicts a child will be born, and his name will be Immanuel. And this isn't just some nice symbolic name, it literally means God with us. The child's very name is a claim about who he is. And hey, if you thought Immanuel was on the nose, just listen to Isaiah 9. It gives this promised child a whole list of royal titles. And right there in the middle, you can't miss it, Mighty God. In the original Hebrew, El Gibor, this is not ambiguous. It's a direct title for God, used for Yahweh in other places. The prophet is straight up calling a human child Mighty God. So he's got eternal origins and divine names. But what about his status? What does he actually do? Does he act like a man, or does he share in the very authority of God? Okay, this verse from Psalm 110 is a huge deal. It's the single most quoted Old Testament passage in the New Testament. And you're about to see why. It feels like we're eavesdropping on a divine conversation. But notice, there are two lords here. So what's going on? In the original Hebrew, the distinction is perfectly clear. The first lord is Yahweh, God's personal covenant name. The second one, Adoni, is King David speaking about his superior, his lord. And this figure, David's lord, is invited by Yahweh to sit at his right hand, the ultimate position of shared power and authority. What we're seeing here is a prophecy of two distinct divine persons. It's an incredible passage that really lays the groundwork for what would later be understood as the Trinity. Now, let's jump over to this absolutely stunning vision from the prophet Daniel. He sees this figure, like a son of man, being brought before God and given an everlasting kingdom. But then comes this crucial detail that should make us all lean in a bit closer. All people, nations, and languages will serve him. Now, that Aramaic word for serve, palah, is the whole key. Throughout the entire book of Daniel, this specific word is only used for religious worship, the kind of service you give to the one true God or to a false god. It is never used for serving a human king. So what Daniel is seeing in his vision is this Son of Man figure receiving the kind of universal worship that is reserved for God alone. That is just incredible. So we've seen his eternal origin, his divine names, his divine authority. But the prophet Zechariah gives us what might just be the most startling, the most paradoxical piece of this entire portrait. I want you to listen really carefully to the pronouns here. The speaker is God. He says, "They shall look upon me, whom they have pierced," and then it immediately switches, "and they shall mourn for him." Just think about what that means. God himself is speaking, and he says that he is the one who will be pierced. But at the same time, he's referred to as him, as another person. It's a shocking prophecy that suggests God can be present on earth in a form that is both divine and yet physically vulnerable. Okay, we have examined all these key pieces of evidence from all across the Old Testament. Now it is time to put this puzzle together and see the complete portrait that the prophets were painting for us. When you actually assemble all the pieces, the portrait that comes into focus is just extraordinary. The prophets describe a figure born as a man, yet existing from eternity. He carries God's own names and is announced as God himself. He shares God's throne, receives divine worship, and is even identified as God who is pierced. This isn't a contradiction. It's a consistent, multifaceted, and frankly stunning portrait of a divine Messiah. So when you step back and look, the ancient Hebrew prophets, writing across different centuries, consistently painted this complex, paradoxical, and divine portrait. They didn't leave behind a sketch of a mere man. They built a frame waiting for a very specific and unique figure. So the question these texts leave us with isn't if such a person was prophesied, but who in all of history could possibly fit this incredible description.